everyone. Welcome back to English Conversation Studio. I'm Anna, and today we are going to talk about a problem that many English learners experience for a very long time. Because many people study grammar, memorize vocabulary, watch videos, and even understand English quite well. But when it is finally time to speak, they suddenly become nervous, confused, silent, and unable to express even simple ideas clearly and naturally.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex, and today we are going to discuss the real reasons why so many learners still cannot speak English fluently even after months or years of studying. Because the problem is usually not intelligence, talent, or grammar knowledge, but rather fear, habits, lack of speaking practice, and the way people train their brains while learning the language every day.
One of the biggest problems is that learners spend too much time consuming English passively. For example, they watch videos, listen to podcasts, read subtitles, or study grammar rules for hours, but they almost never actually open their mouth and speak actively. So the brain becomes very good at understanding English, but very weak at producing language naturally during real conversations.
Yes, that is extremely common, and many learners think they are improving because they understand more content every day. But understanding and speaking are completely different skills, because speaking requires quick thinking, automatic sentence building, confidence, pronunciation control, and the ability to react immediately without translating every word slowly inside your head before speaking.
Another major reason is fear of making mistakes, because many learners believe they must speak perfectly, use advanced grammar, or sound like native speakers immediately. So they become overly careful, and instead of speaking freely and practicing naturally, they stay silent most of the time, because they are afraid that someone might laugh at their accent, grammar mistakes, or pronunciation problems.
Yes, and that fear creates a very dangerous habit, because the more you avoid speaking, the more nervous your brain becomes every time you try to speak English. And eventually, even very simple conversations start feeling stressful, uncomfortable, and mentally exhausting, even though you actually know enough vocabulary and grammar to communicate successfully in normal situations.
I also think many learners focus too much on difficult grammar rules at the beginning, and instead of learning how to communicate naturally using simple sentences, they constantly analyze every tense, every structure, and every small grammar detail, which slows down their speaking speed and prevents them from developing automatic fluency during conversations.
Exactly, because when native speakers talk, they are usually not thinking consciously about grammar formulas while speaking. Instead, their brain automatically produces patterns through repetition and daily communication practice, and learners need to train this same automatic response system instead of trying to mentally calculate grammar rules during every sentence they say.
Another important problem is translating from the native language, because many learners first create the sentence completely in their own language, then translate it word by word into English. And this process makes speaking extremely slow, unnatural, stressful, and sometimes grammatically incorrect, because languages do not always follow the same structure or logic.
Yes, and learners who constantly translate usually feel mentally tired very quickly during conversations because their brain is doing double work every time they speak, first creating the idea in one language and then trying to rebuild it again in English, which creates delays, hesitation, confusion, and loss of confidence during real-time communication situations. Many learners also underestimate the importance of repetition because they study hundreds of new words every week, but they rarely repeat old vocabulary consistently. So the brain quickly forgets most of the information because it does not see those words being used regularly in meaningful communication or emotional real-life situations. Yes, repetition is absolutely necessary for fluency because language learning is not about seeing information once. It is about training the brain repeatedly until words, phrases, and sentence patterns become automatic habits that appear naturally without conscious effort every single time you need to speak. Another reason learners struggle is because they practice English only in artificial situations, like textbook exercises or isolated grammar drills, but they rarely simulate real-life conversations where emotions, quick reactions, interruptions, misunderstandings, and natural speaking speed are involved, so their English knowledge stays theoretical instead of becoming practical communication ability. Exactly. And this is why role-play conversations, shadowing practice, daily speaking simulations, and active dialogue training are much more effective for fluency development, because they prepare the brain for real communication pressure instead of only academic exercises that do not reflect natural human interaction in everyday life. I also notice that many learners compare themselves too much with advanced speakers online, and when they hear fluent people speaking quickly and confidently, they immediately feel discouraged and think they are not talented enough, even though fluency is usually the result of years of consistent practice, mistakes, repetition, and gradual improvement over time. Yes, comparison can seriously damage motivation, because learners often forget that every fluent speaker was once a beginner who struggled with simple sentences, pronunciation mistakes, and fear of speaking. And the only reason they improved is because they continued practicing consistently, instead of quitting every time they felt embarrassed or frustrated. Another hidden problem is that learners often study English in a very stressful and perfectionistic way, where every mistake feels like failure. So instead of enjoying the learning process, they become mentally exhausted, frustrated, and emotionally disconnected from the language, which reduces motivation and slows down long-term progress significantly. Yes, learning should feel natural and sustainable, because when people enjoy speaking, experimenting, and communicating even with mistakes, the brain learns faster and keeps motivation longer. But when learning becomes constant pressure and self-criticism, many learners lose confidence and stop practicing regularly after some time. One thing that really helps is speaking with simple vocabulary instead of waiting until you know advanced words, because many learners already know enough English to communicate basic ideas, daily activities, emotions, plans, and opinions, but they underestimate how powerful simple and clear communication can actually be in real conversations. Exactly. Fluency is not about using the most difficult vocabulary possible. Fluency is about expressing ideas smoothly, confidently, and naturally without freezing during conversations. And many advanced speakers actually use very simple everyday words most of the time while speaking naturally and effectively. I think learners should also create daily English habits, even small ones, like thinking in English while walking, describing actions during the day, repeating phrases aloud, or talking to themselves for a few minutes, because these small habits slowly train the brain to become comfortable using English naturally in daily life. Yes, consistency is much more important than intensity, because practicing a little every single day builds stronger language habits than studying for many hours once a week and then completely stopping for several days afterward without active communication practice or repetition. So today we discussed many important reasons why learners still cannot speak English fluently, including fear of mistakes, overthinking grammar, lack of active speaking, translating in the head, weak repetition habits, perfectionism, and comparison with others. And understanding these problems is the first step toward improving real fluency. Yes, and the solution is not perfection, but consistent real speaking practice, simple communication, repetition, confidence building, and daily exposure to natural English conversations, because fluency grows gradually when you use the language actively, instead of only studying it passively from books and videos. If you enjoyed this lesson, please don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends, because practicing together makes learning easier and more motivating. And subscribe to English Conversation Studio for more powerful English speaking lessons, vocabulary training, and real-life conversation practice. Thank you very much for listening and practicing with us today. See you in the next lesson, and keep speaking English every day.